Hi, I'm Rachel with Stirring the Deep, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what's been happening in the Christian community, about people talking about leaving the church system. Not the true church by believers, but the church system, often called the institutional church or the IC. Because I see a lot of restlessness happening, there's a lot more talk about it, and I wanted to share with you my story. Now, I know this topic brings up a lot of different questions and issues, and I want to address some of those later on, not in this video, but in another video where I have more time, about like Hebrews 10:25 verse about not forsaking the assembling together, and issues about young Christians or fellowship, those sorts of things. But here I just want to tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up in the church, and like a lot of us that grew up in the church, there comes a time where you have to make God your God and the faith your faith. And God basically brought me to a point in my life where He turned everything upside down, where I was just tired of my life. I just wanted God to take over. And it came to a point where I wanted a relationship with God that was real. I didn't want a religion. I didn't want to go through the acts anymore. I didn't want to just go to church. I wanted a real relationship with God. So I started seeking Him in His Word. But now when I was reading on a daily basis, getting to know Him. God, who are you? Show me who you are. Because I want this to be real, because that's what a real relationship is, right? It's communication back and forth. It's really getting to know somebody. And God started to open up His Word to me, and it was slow, that development of a relationship, right? Because there's a lot of things I had to let go of, and it was a process. But that's what started to happen in my life. And so I was no longer reading to do a Bible study or to fix myself. I was reading because to build this intimacy with God. And around that same time, I was involved in this church, and highly involved. And my husband and I, we would go to Bible studies and small groups and help out at the church. And we were building a great sense of community and friends and support there. And it was wonderful what we had. And so, but over time, what started happening is this gap started happening between this cultivation of God in terms of our intimacy with Him, and spending that time in His Word one-on-one, and listening to His Spirit and Him in our life and this whole thing, and then our church involvement. And it wasn't just that we disagreed about a couple of, truths in the Bible. It was more than that. It was a bigger gap happening, sort of just underneath it all. This big gap was happening. And it was creating this restlessness in us that at first we really didn't understand. And so it just continued, this restlessness. So we decided to take a break from the church, because whenever you're so wrapped up in something, it's very hard to hear clearly. And we're like, God, we just want to be still and be with you and give ourselves time not to be influenced by all these other things, including our own thoughts, because we had enjoyed all that community and all the social aspects and all that it offered. Because we had to honor that restlessness and figure out what was going on. So we just sat with God day after day, seeking, reading in His Word, the old prophets, Revelation, just everything, reading all of His Word. And over time, what happened was we started to, from His Word and just the prompting of the Spirit, sense that God was calling us out of the church. Not the true body of believers. We're always connected with them, but the church system, the business, the institution, right? And this was a radical thought, because I had grown up in the church. I had always been in the church. It was a part of my life. And I was like, what can this be? But the more I prayed, the more I read, the more I felt, yes, this is exactly what you're feeling. And I started seeking around, and other people were feeling this too. And so a lot of people had already left the church. Wow, this is incredible. But, having been in the church, we decided to go back and say, well, let's just see how our spirit feels. Because, you ask God, and He tells you in His Word, and He confirms it in your spirit and through other people, but you're still like, oh, are you sure, God? I mean, this was such a big deal, and it was so hard because we had such a community of friends. But when we went back there, it was like the Spirit was pushing us out the door. It was undeniable that we weren't supposed to be there. So we haven't been back since. And it wasn't to go find another church. That was also something that was very clear. It was to come out of that church system. And it was difficult, and I would continue to pray, God, why? Is this right? Because I had friends and family in the church, many still are, and I just felt like that message just grew clearer and stronger over time. And the basic message was that I'm reading from God's Word is that judgment is coming upon the church. And part of that judgment is that the sanctuary, the house of God, is going to be given over to the enemy. It talks about this in Isaiah and Jeremiah. That all kind of connects back to Revelation. It's incredible. And that's prophecy. And that's what's going to happen. And God's going to call his people out. He's going to protect his true people. The true people, the people that really are listening to God, are going to follow him and his voice wherever he leads. And he's going to be their sanctuary and their shepherd and protect them and guard them and provide for them in every way. And that's what I've been seeing happening. Exactly. You see what the church is starting to become, and how the enemy is taking over the sanctuary, and how people are being given into a big delusion about how, the church really has become the center. And people are really trusting the church and man for their protection, for their provision, for comfort, for their teaching. Everything is really centered on the church. They can't pull away from it because they feel like then what's going to happen to me? So that means that's where your trust is. And so that's exactly what you see happening. And it's exactly what his word talks about. When our trust should be ultimately in God. And God can use different things, but it's like, who is the source of your trust? So anyway, God, continued to unfold his word and kind of lay out his plan to me. And it has been very hard because it's not the majority, it's not the mainstream. But the choice really for us, came down between not so much leave the church or this, because, you give all these reasons for why, a church could be bad or good. And whose voice are you listening to? Are you listening to man's? Are you listening to God's? And that's a choice. So I just hope that in this video that I encourage you to seek God's truth in this. Not just mine, not somebody else's, not your church's. What is God saying to you? What is his will? And give yourself enough time to really listen to his voice, that still small voice. Because if we truly seek, if we really want to know, if we truly seek and ask, then he will open up his word to us, and he will lead us, and he will show us what his will is for us. But we have to be willing to listen. We have to be willing to truly follow him. So it's just my prayer that you would have that seeking heart. And then I'm going to address those other issues that I talked about, the fellowship and assembling together and young believers, in another video. But meanwhile, just pray that you would just seek and listen to that small, still